Welcome to Thursday with Sarah Heiner and the Bottom Line Advocator. I'm so glad you're here. We have a really important topic today to talk about. COVID has taken, obviously, physical toll on all of us, huge physical toll on all of us. The price that we have paid to protect all of us from dying, to keep the numbers as low as possible, let our healthcare system catch up. The debate has been the emotional toll, the financial toll, all the other collateral damage of this disease. And we're going to talk today to Dr. Lise about that emotional toll and the price it's taking, in particular on our kids. And, it's been the COVID, it's also been all this emotional unrest, the societal unrest that's gone on. The amount of pressure that we have taken in ourselves and what is going on that all of us are dealing with right now, so important. So that's what the topic is today. I'm going to introduce Dr. Lise in just one second. Let me just remind you that we have a growing library of these videos. They're in the Facebook page in the video section here. You can also go to Bottom Line Inc.'s YouTube page, subscribe there. We put all those in. We also have hundreds of them that we've been collecting through the years, other interviews that I've done over the years. So come on to that. Tell your friends about these. Share these. You can share these. Let them know we're doing these. And share once they run. You can come back and watch it again. So you can always, even though we have these times at 4 o'clock on Thursdays, you can always come back. We always rerun them. And again, they're always in the library. So don't feel like you're going to miss it if you can't be here right then and there. Let's see what else. If you have questions, post them on up there. We will see. Someone is supposed to be feeding me questions, but they're not answering me today because welcome to live. So post them up there, though. So if I don't get to talk to them right now, then put them up there, and Dr. Lise and I will follow up with you and give you the answers after the fact, because I'm sure that a bunch of you have all sorts of questions. What should I do? My kid is doing this. How do I answer them? I've got a teen. They're blowing up at me. You name it. So here we go. Let me bring on Dr. Lise. Hi there.
Hi.
All right, I got to read all the bullet points, so I'm sure that I get every detail of your wonderful bio for everybody. So Dr. Lise is known as the shameless psychiatrist, actually. She's a double board certified adult and child psychiatrist. And she's she's an assistant clinical professor at New York Medical College, works with people of all ages, actually, children and families, because children can't be worked with in isolation. It's all about the family besides. She's got a practice in New York as well as out on Long Island. She's got a brand new book called No Shame, let's start again. No Shame, Real Talk with Your Kids about sex, self-confidence, and healthy relationships. And that just launched, so that's available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold. I presume it's available digitally as well as in print, whatever form that anybody likes. Really important stuff, but we're not going to talk about sex today. We're going to talk about other things. And I also just say, I love this on your website, Leah, that your goal in life and practice is to help all parents raise strong, secure, and resilient children who become strong, secure, and resilient adults. And I think that is probably one of the most important things that we as parents can absolutely do. Our job is not to be their friends. Our job is to help them become great citizens. And let me just give your website for anybody that wants to learn more about you, your practice, and your book. Dr. Leah Lise, Dr. Leah, LEALIS.com. So welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So great to see you.
Yeah, it sounds so good. I love it.
It's always important, right? You don't realize how good you are. It's always nice to be introduced and you go, wow, what a nice, how good are you?
All those degrees on the wall behind me, I guess it paid off.
Look at those. See, you are official. You have all those certificates. All right. So meanwhile, we're having a very happy moment in the midst of a very unhappy time for an awful lot of people. So give me just kind of a high level, what you've been dealing with kids of all ages for the last 6 months on this or so. What have you seen? Where is it now as the kids are going back to school? Give me just like a high level just to frame it for starters.
I think that the high level is the increase in a lot of the anxiety I've seen amongst my normally not so anxious teens, and a boomerang effect from my anxious teens is kind of ironic because the ones who hated school are now less anxious because they don't have to go to school. But the ones who, were pretty typical with their anxieties levels are now way more anxious because they're having problems with connecting and loneliness. And a new study came out that said, the rates of loneliness in girls went up from 33% to 70%. I'm not saying boys are immune from loneliness, but girls are like absolutely, utterly hardwired to be social. Anybody with a teenage girl knows that. And without that face-to-face contact, they are really struggling with their depression and anxiety, because so much of it we don't understand. Like, we're hardwired to be social in person. There's a lot of pheromones exchange, like, young girls, bestie friends, they'll cycle together in terms of their menstrual cycles. Like, they are like hard, like they need that dopamine reinforcement of face-to-face contact and touch. And I'm not saying boys also need it too, but girls seem to be, in my practice, suffering a little more because of that. The other huge problem I'm seeing, go ahead, you can interrupt.
Okay, so has that changed at all? That the character of what they're experiencing early on, it was like fear, what's this thing? Now I'm home, all that initial isolation. Has that changed at all now when they're going back to school? That, like, is the fear different? Is the frustration different at all?
A lot of my teenage girls are not that and boys, I should say, are not that afraid necessarily of getting sick, because I don't think they have the same risk understanding as adults. Their development of their understanding of risk is way different from adults because they don't have the wisdom of experience. And teenagers are not always that risk averse. But I do think a lot of them are, some of them are obviously afraid, especially those who may have OCD or other things like that. But, it's more that they feel hard done by. Like, they feel like they're getting, they're not going to their dances. They're not missing their proms. They're missing their graduations. And they're just like, this is just terrible. Like, woe is me. And like, they're having a little bit of a pity party. And that started to click in around graduation time, where, all those things that go along with the end of the school year, they were deprived of. And
it actually was a whole grief. Like, it really was deep grief for things that they lost and they'll never get back again.
Yeah, I agree.
Graduation, sweet 16 parties, bar mitzvahs for young kids, whatever it was, the bouncy house that they were looking forward to for their 7th birthday.
And this is not a generation that was used to any kind of adversity. At least most of my peers will tell you that they never went through 9/11. They never went through any kind of adversity. This is their first major generational trauma that they've experienced. And they were kind of ill prepared because, I hate to say it, but we've kind of like coddled that generation in a lot of ways. Parents are very involved. There's a lot of like, they get, tutors, they get, everything is, of course, this all depends on your socioeconomic status, but that generation was kind of coddled, and all of a sudden they had to face this massive adversity and they were not prepared. And so they really were grieving. It was tough.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to ask you actually, like, how this generation, like, or what you're seeing relative to, so you're seeing people in New York. So in what you've read or studied in terms of the impact of this on past crises, be it Hurricane Sandy, where people lost houses and lost, they lost power for weeks a day, different kind of traumatic things. Katrina obviously was very traumatic for a lot of people, not in this area. 9/11, as you said, the kids didn't experience, but a lot of their parents do remember it. And, that it all filters around. So is this similar in any ways to that, or is this just so unique because none of us, literally the country has never dealt with this before?
Well, I think the people who did, go through Katrina, go through those kinds of traumatic experiences were in some ways better prepared because they were already used to sacrifice. They had to build up their house again. They had to move, whatever. I think a lot of the difference between that and now is like, this is the whole nation. Like, it's a collective trauma for the whole nation. I think, 9/11, those kids don't remember that. So, now kids these days don't remember that, parents might, but even that was very New York centric in terms of how hard it hit people. The most traumatized people were in New York and, in Washington or wherever that planes hit. And I think that, this is like a nationwide trauma. It's like, it's so interesting. It's worldwide really, but, just in terms of what, this is every kid has a personal story. Every kid will remember this like it was yesterday. Like when Kennedy was shot, everyone will remember missing their prom. My daughter will always remember missing her birthday. She'll never forget it.
Right.
And so for them, this is their life changing moment. And it can be an incredible, powerful force for good because adversity makes us stronger. Or of course, if they don't have resiliency in, their community and in their own genetics, it can be the start of of an unraveling.
So let me talk two pieces at one time. Let me bring in the concept of all the social unrest that's going on at the same time. And then I want to talk about resiliency and a lesson in resiliency for kids, because the social unrest as well is about, in some ways, a grand scale of, besides justice and unfairness and all that, there's also a grand scale of disappointment, and that's part of all of it as well. So how is the social unrest layering on the COVID? Are they two separate pieces to the kids? Are the kids impacted or feeling all that all of us parents are feeling at this moment in time? Because I don't know about you, but me, the pain of the politics, the not being able to say something, the lack of freedom of speech because someone's going to judge you, and the lack of tolerance and acceptance. Like, the parents are acting as such, the grown-ups in terms of our behavior is so childish, I'll call it. That's 14 things all rolled up in one. Could you unpack that, please, to us, Dr.?
Yeah, sure. I mean, parents are addicted to the news right now. Everybody, partially because we can't go out and be as active as we used to be. So we're on TV and devices a lot more, but also because it's so stunning. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And so I'm sure this is like one of the most watched debates ever. And a lot of kids are hearing it and seeing it. They're actually seeing it on, social media. They're tuning into it with their parents. And it is so incredibly negative. And every study ever done on happiness shows that when you surround yourself with negativity, you will get drowned. And
what they're doing in the schools in terms of the messaging, and this, there's no question that the education system needs to adjust. Messaging has to be solved, but the presumption that everybody has to feel the same and think the same, and those with differing opinions are not allowed to. Kids that are being told to feel guilty because of how they're born, it's just exactly what we're trying not to do. Right? It's this very kind of confusing messaging for kids.
Yeah, it is. And the call out culture, actually, the cancel culture, call out culture was invented by teenagers. I mean, they were the first ones to get into the lunchroom and say, like, he's out, like, you can't sit at my table. I mean, this is not invented by adults,
right.
And it just kind of got brought to a high level when social media came around, and now everybody's kind of, shaming everybody else. And, you cast the first stone, and it is so out of control right now. And everybody's being told to feel shame. You're shamed if you're white. You're shamed if you're if you're in a heteronormative relationship. What would you know about what it's like to be somebody else? And that burns down bridges. And I have written an article about call out culture, and I really feel that you need to address it head on, like with your teenager, and talk about call out culture, and just look at their social media and say, wow, they're all ganging up on that one kid. Like, we all make mistakes. We all say things like, they might make fun of, a Chinese person and say something stupid about a Chinese restaurant, whatever it is, or say something about the Hung flu or whatever. Like, you don't crucify that kid, because you could say, hey, that's offensive, I don't like that, but that's it. And be like, and let the kid apologize and be done with it. But it's this kind of idea that we have to then wall that person out because they didn't learn their lesson. What ends up happening? It creates extremism, and it makes them even more, depressed or isolated, and it works. It totally backfires. It's horrifyingly scary from my point of view, because these kids come in depressed. They want to kill themselves because they've been outcasted. And this has to be addressed head on by administrators and children, and we cannot be part of the problem. We have to be kinder.
And where we're trying to get kids to communicate and to speak and to be open, is it all creating this fear of speaking, right? That they don't, because whatever they say is going to be wrong. They're tipping on, they're on their little tiptoes, not being able to say what they like or what they don't like, or to like that, whatever is running through their head, they're not allowed to share for fear
True.
of cancel. I like this movie. I don't like this. How could you like that book? You can't like that book. How can you like that musician because they like Trump? No, that's bad. You can't like that. Like everybody is judging
Yeah.
at every level.
And they can't be their authentic self anymore. You know,
Right.
like when they were a kid, how they was their authentic self, and they were running around in, you know, with whatever kind of toy they wanted, and now they're embarrassed to say they like the toy. They're embarrassed to say they still, you know, like Dungeons and Dragons. Like it's crushing their soul a little. And, you know, I would say that, you know, that we've got to stop making it so personal. Like if someone expresses their opinion about something, it's not about, you know, you and what you think about that other person's opinion. It's about, thank you for sharing that. You know, I might think about it a little differently. And it's like, you have to teach children how to communicate. I always say, like, basic communication skills should be taught in every school. I mean, I teach them all the time. You know, use I think, I feel, I want statements. If you stick with I think, I feel, I want, like if you're offended by something, you say, I think that you didn't realize when you said about da da da, you know, I feel upset about it. You know, I want you to think about it next time and say it differently. You know, if you just say you did this, you did that, you were rude, you know, and then all of a sudden it just becomes a huge problem. So, you know, teaching them to be kind and actually like correcting yourself when you see yourself doing like politically, like this idea of oh my God, forget it. I can't stand this politics stuff. I'm just going to move to Canada. Like that's a little like, you know, you're part of the problem when you do that,
So
you
yes,
know?
I want to talk about that piece of it. Let me just remind anyone who's watching this, if you've got questions or you've got stories to share, post them on there and they'll pass over to me. I do have someone is with me, you'll be pleased to know, monitoring the Facebook
Good.
page to forward along. So if you're experiencing this, if you've seen it, if your kids have come home, you know, distraught, whatever, like share and let us know what you've experienced and what questions and what, you know, help participate in this conversation. Are these kids like, so
Also, let's create oh, sorry.
go ahead. No, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was going to say, let's create amazing political citizens by modeling appropriate debate. And I know they do that in school sometimes, but you could do that at home. And I would say, like, over the Thanksgiving table next year, if you're going to talk about politics, instead of just having everyone yelling at each other, like have there be a ball and only the people at the ball can talk. So everybody gets to say, and then the next person who gets the ball has to reflect the pearls from what they just heard, even if they don't agree. It's this idea of, you know, teaching actual listening to somebody else's point of view. So you could say, I hear you say that, you know, Biden might be too old to be president. However, I feel that, and you could say that he is very sharp, you know? So it's like, and then you pass the ball and the next person makes their comment and then passes the ball. So it's like you're modeling, like, this is how we can actually have a constructive conversation.
So let's talk about that. So parents and role modeling. My understanding, and you're the expert, that there's nothing more important in kids' lives and learning how to be great, resilient citizens than their parents as role models and the adults around them as role models. So through all this, what are you seeing parents doing and mistakes that parents are making or what they're doing right? And talk a little about what the parents need to do, the messaging with regard to COVID and with the social justice. I mean, I just think it was just a double whammy in terms of the parents. And I know a lot of parents who are mighty fearful. So, you know, does their fear translate to their kids? Or as you said, they're kind of not paying attention to it. But I've seen kids in the park that kind of, you know, point a finger and go, oh no, she doesn't have a mask on. Or, you know, I'm within 5 feet of somebody, I'm going to get sick, right? So that utter fear of that. Like, talk about the importance of parents as role models and guides to help their children process all of this.
Well, children, especially young children, completely get their rules about society from what they just pair it with their parents here and say. So if the parents are saying, like, you have to stay 6 feet back, you have to wear a mask, you know, otherwise you might die, you know, obviously they're going to internalize that kind of fear and then be very, very fearful. I always say to parents, like, you know, you want to tell them the problem, but you also want to tell them the solution to not scare them. So you might want to say, you know, there is a very serious disease called COVID, but we can keep ourselves safe if we wear a mask and if we wash our hands. And, you know, because you don't want to, like, you know, not give them a solution and make them feel like they don't have any control over the outcome. And that's a very good authoritative approach to parenting, which means you are going to collaborate with them. You're going to explain things, as opposed to an authoritarian approach, which is like, just wear a mask because I told you so, and no explanation, or a neglectful, which is like, you just don't say anything. And I think you have to, spend the time to explain why things are happening, but also always give them solutions, but also be okay if they don't take them, and say, okay, yeah, you didn't take my advice. This happened. So how are we going to fix it, instead of getting angry?
Right. How important is it to help them with getting out of the house, right? So in terms of, is it okay, to return to my sports activities? Is it okay to, go back to dance or whatever activities they were with, help them with healthy habits, balance the, whatever fear and paranoia versus it's okay. And no, don't feel guilty that now the talk is that the kids are super transmitters, perhaps, even though they don't get sick. So you may never see your grandmother again.
Yeah. I think that you need to make a decision as a parent, what your values are. And so if you have a grandparent in the home, you're probably going to be a lot less risk averse than if you don't, in terms of what you allow your kids to do. But once you figure, and I'm talking about younger kids, because teenagers we can have that as a separate discussion, because they're not always going to listen. It's not like you can laugh.
Less or more risk averse.
Yeah.
If I've got a grandparent in the home, I'm going to be a little more careful.
That's what I mean. Yes, we're going to be more risk adverse. We're going to be more careful. And then you might say to your kid, I know your friends are going to dance and your friends are going to school, but we have made the decision you're not going because of this X, Y, and Z reason. And then you just explain it to them. It's not really up to them, younger children, to decide. But with teenagers, it's a whole different kettle of fish. And whatever it is that you decide to do, stick to and be proud of your decision. And you can always change if grandma decides to go to Florida for a couple of months or whatever, stay with the other, relative, then things might change. But like, once you make a decision, stick with it, and don't be afraid to just, be a parent and make a decision. But, when it comes to teenagers, you can't just lay down the law. Good luck with that, because, they'll go be subversive. They're like, they can just lie and do whatever they want, as anybody as a teenager knows. So it's gotta be democracy. It's gotta be one vote. It's gotta be compromise. And what I mean by that is, you can't tell a teenage boy not to go see their girlfriend. Good luck. I don't care how many grandparents are in the house. You might be living in a nursing home. Good luck. And so you really have to, like, say, how can we compromise so you can get what you want and we can keep ourselves safe? And, there is no way to be completely safe right now. So it's just a question of, what risks you're going to take and are willing to take.
Well, with older kids, it's part of it also sitting down and, it's always a fine line. And I never knew, when to shift to talking to my kids who are now in their 20s as pure adults versus, they're teenagers and you kind of think they're half adult, but not really. But in terms of talking to them in an adult-like way, in terms of, here's the facts, let's work on a solution together, like really talk to them, not talk down to them. As you said, it's not, you can't wag your finger at a teenager because they're just going to wag a different finger at you back. But you can have the intelligent conversation, say, let's try and go through this. And then how important is that then to include them in the solution so that they're part of that and part of that plan?
It's compromise. It's literally like a husband and wife relationship or whatever. Everything is compromise with teenagers. Compromise. There is no laying down the law. There is no finger wagging. It will always backfire. And you might get what you want in the short run by being very, very, very authoritarian, but they won't really respect your decision. They won't understand, and they won't become part of their values because they don't agree. So, that's why it's like really important to like compromise and get them to agree, because then they're going to listen and they're going to obey your rules because they believe in them. And that's the difference. So I know it's not a straight answer. I think you have to look at the risks in your home. You have to make a decision as a family. If you want your teenager to strictly quarantine, then you got to give them, unrestricted access to their phone so they can talk to their girlfriend, or maybe they spend a week over their girlfriend's house and they only come home after they've been COVID tested. You got to come up with a compromise, whatever works for you.
One of the hardest things I think about both the COVID and the social justice stuff that's going on is the uncertainty and the timeline. Like the hurricane comes through and it's gone. And now you know you have to clean up the
Yeah,
devastation. But when
sure.
there's absolutely no idea what the end game is on this. Originally, it was bend the curve. Let's just get an understanding of this disease, and then we can all go on with our life. Somehow that's shifted to anybody that dies. That's a, you know, there's another person that got sick, and every illness is reported, so that the goal line keeps moving. So how do you help kids deal with the uncertainty of life at this moment in time? Because it's like, I just want it done. My daughter said this to me a few times. My kids are nomads right now. I just
Mhm.
want it done. I want my life to be normal. Well, it's not going to be like it was, and that's not going to be for a while. So then what?
Tolerating uncertainty is not just a question for children, it's a question for all of us right now. Um, Uncertainty is the worst when it comes to anxiety. People fear what they don't know or fear something going to happen way more than they actually fear an event. You'll fear a hurricane a day before, your anxiety level go way up. Then when the hurricane has hit your home, then you're like calm, because it's anticipatory anxiety. We don't know what's coming. That is the worst psychologically. So you know it is a great life skill to figure out how to tolerate uncertainty, and uncertainty will be always. So, with young kids, I like to use certain techniques like school age kids. I call it scheduling worry time. So when they're having worries, I will say, okay, let's write down all your worries, and you can write them down through the course of the day. And then at night, you and I are just going to go over all of them. We're going to worry about it all at once. And that's actually great for adults too, because I keep a little, there's reminders on my phone of my worries. And then I just, every time I have a new worry, I'll add it. And if it goes away, I'll click it off. And almost like seeing it there makes me feel like I've got some control over it. So I love scheduling worry time.
Is it important to classify your worries as realistic or not realistic? Because sometimes you can really catastrophize.
Of course.
So that is, as you got your worries, I've got the worry that I won't be able to have a play date with my friend tomorrow. And then you have the worry that my mother may die.
Yes.
So, or
Exactly.
I've got the worry that I'm not going to, here it is September, and I've got the worry that I won't be able to have my senior prom. Right. So
Yeah.
do you classify the different types of worry so that you start to understand them from a rational point of view as well?
Right on. That's classic CBT, everything you just explained. And yes, if you are, if you're savvy, you can do that. And I do it constantly in my practice. So it's like, what is catastrophizing? What is negative filtering? What is black and white thinking? What is fortune telling, meaning predicting the future negatively? And you got to look at what's probable, not what's possible. So you could even rank your worries in order of probable versus, possible, like possible being the most far out. And then you can look at them and say, okay, and some of the worries just hang around. They're just lurking worries. Like, what if my mother dies? And that could be every day. But I think just by being mindful of them and actually giving them words and labels in our mind makes them a lot less scary. It's less scary when you identify them. And then of course I would argue, you should do something about them, which is rationalize them and not and compartmentalize them so they don't drift into every moment of our day. Like we're in our tennis match and all of a sudden we're worrying about whether or not you're going to get a college scholarship for tennis. Like it's not going to help you in that moment. So you got to be present in the moment. So how do you clear your mind in the moment? And that's where some mindfulness techniques come in handy. For younger kids, I use tip skills, which is temperature, intense exercise, progressive muscle relaxation, and paced breathing. Super easy. Temperature is put splash some water in your head or put on an ice pack over your nose and mouth and hold your breath for 30 seconds. That makes your body think it's drowning, and it's going to shift everything down, shift your whole body down in terms of your breathing rate. Intense exercise is I'll do this in my office if a patient is having a temper tantrum. I'll just tell them high knees, jumping jacks, and I'll just make them get their heart rate up. And you can make your kid run around the house 6 times, and then paced breathing is 5 seconds in, 7 seconds out. For young children, I use 3 seconds in, 5 seconds out, because they're sometimes can't hold their breath that long. And then progressive muscle relaxation is just a very simple exercise of tensing and relaxing different muscle groups. Little kids are not going to just do this because they want to. They'll do this because you're going to give them prizes. So I recommend hey, if you do this, I'll give you an M&M, a sticker, more screen time, whatever it is. And then it becomes habit and they'll start to do it on their own.
And how about, so let's talk about then, so those are the younger kids. How about this whole, the uncertainty for how do you talk to the middle schoolers or the older kids?
Well, that's where the beauty of the cognitive piece comes in. You were just talking about, because little kids won't really necessarily engage so much with the cognitive piece, like what is an possible, probable. They don't always understand all that, but like older kids do. So middle school, starting to use like resources like Anxiety Free Kids by Bonnie Zucker or Super Powered by Shafali are two great books, self-help books. It's where you can really start to identify the thoughts and say, oh, are these thoughts helping me? Are they not helping me? And actually, I recommend parents and kids do it together at the dinner table. They each come up with one irrational thought and have everyone else at the dinner table talk about why they think that thought is not helping them. And I'll like have them do these exercises to develop practice. And for later teens, just taking up a straight up meditative practice, if they'd be willing to do it. And you know what? These kinds of things pay off so big for teenagers. I say reward them for it. Tell them if you practice a meditation, and you really learn how, and I see that you're doing it, I'll, contribute towards your purchase of a car. I'll buy you a new iPad, whatever, because, they can also be rewarded. And once they start doing it, as I said, we're creatures of habit. So you might have to reward them for it in the beginning, but then they're going to like it because it really does help.
Those are pretty big rewards. You're a generous rewarder.
Well, with teenagers, unfortunately, I'm not talking about doing one meditation, but if they really take up a practice, take a course or whatever, teenagers are, they're tough, Of course, it's up to the family and their level of income, and maybe it's just $100 or whatever you can do, but or a new pair of sneakers. But these are all things that are going to incentivize kids to practice good, healthy mental habits.
Okay. I have a question from someone. So someone has a question. Their daughter is in college and taking her classes from an off-campus apartment. Some friends are going to parties, but thankfully she refuses. But now she's feeling a bit isolated and she's down. So what advice can this parent offer to that person?
What I can offer is to figure out who in your community, that she's in apartment, that group of kids, wherever she is off campus, can COVID pod with her, can create a community. She is lonely and she needs to find a way. Now, obviously virtual is not the same. And so I would really encourage her to find those 5 friends who are willing to say, you know what, I don't want to go to that party either. That's too many kids, right? But let's hang out, just the 5 of us, and we'll do our own things and we'll hike and we'll, it's like the kids who like Dungeons and Dragons in college and they play that, they form their own little thing, or the kids who don't like to drink, so instead they go join the camping club. It's like there's a key for every lock. She needs to find her people, and maybe her search needs to be a little wider. Meaning
also that they're falling into this all or nothing thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That it's either I can go to the party or I'm sitting alone in my basement. But we are allowed to go out to the park. I walk my dog at the park every day. It's been beautiful seeing in the last few months all the picnicking. The groups of kids are out there, so that there is a middle ground.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So she's black and white thinking, I either go to this party and put myself in an unsafe place, or I'm alone. And that is not the only answer. So the answer is to broaden her search, find like-minded kids, adults who are interested in what she's interested, and whether it's a great time to really explore sporty things. So I don't know where this person is. I don't know if you said New York, but you can run in the winter. You can bike ride in the winter. Buy some really good gear. This is your opportunity to buy ski gear. And you can get out there. I mean, it's gonna be cold, but you'll be fine. Wear a hat. And it doesn't get that cold. Just find a way to be safe, but also, and also, you might feel comfortable with this small group of kids to be inside, and you'll take that risk, and you'll, because you need that face-to-face contact, which most people do.
So a lot of kids have connected virtually. So is that the same? If I've got, there's Netflix party and things like that, or there are a few of these things that people can drop in, but biochemically, is it the same for me to have some Zoom party as it is? How important is it to actually be in physical proximity to people?
I mean, I hate to say it, but very. And listen, I was all for the Zoom parties. I'm all for the virtual, gaming for these teenagers, which I hated a year ago. If you asked me a year ago, should I let my teenage boy
Right.
play, um, War of the World or Minecraft or whatever they're playing with their friends, I would have been like, no way, like let them socialize in person, but now I'm like, okay, fine. It's better than nothing. At least they're not alone. Um, However, is not the same. I mean, I can't even tell you how important nonverbal and chemical interactions are for the humankind. I don't think we have nearly enough depth of understanding of that yet. We're going to figure out more as time goes on, but like in the midbrain, in the lower brain, so much communication goes on through, smell. I mean, just like other animals, we are animals, and we cannot forget that. So, as I said, like the dopamine centers of kids' brains go crazy when they're in physical contact with others. And, yeah, we don't have a depth of understanding of how it's going to affect them. So no, it's not the same. However, given the risk of the situation, it's as good as we're going to get right now.
Although, again, as the country's opening up, some states more than others, right? So New York is quite locked down, but a lot of places are not that locked down at all. And they're trying desperately, because of this risk reward of being locked up versus going out, they're trying to be more open. So to also allow that and then, take the chances. There's things that are being written. I read something by David Katz today about herd immunity, about the growing tolerance levels or the herd immunity throughout, that's increasing. They don't fully, we haven't contact traced it enough, but that it's part of the process that's going on.
Well, this is a zero sum game. Like, we're either going to get the vaccine or get this virus. There's no way out of it now. The cat's out of the bag. So, I think some people have been really smart about it. Like college campuses are saying, okay, as long as you stay on campus, you're not allowed to go home. That's why they've kept them all to Thanksgiving. They're not throwing them out saying, well, now you have COVID, so go home. No, they're quarantining them in another dorm because they know they're not going to get that sick. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but the real risk is to spread it home. So it's going to create a herd immunity quickly on college campuses, and that's a good thing.
Back to when kids are expressing their concerns and problems. So parents have a tendency to downplay sometimes, because your kid is saying they're sad or they're frustrated or they're whatever they are. And parents sometimes have a tendency to want to be encouraging, right? Get them through it. Oh no, honey, it's not that bad. Don't worry about it. You'll get through it or whatever. Is that a good strategy or a bad strategy because you don't want really with them wallowing per se. You want to acknowledge it, but you don't want them to wallow. So you try to get them to go to the other side. Like what's the fine line or balance when a kid is expressing their concern for the parent's response? The balance of
Yes,
indulging versus
you do want to show empathy and warmth to their emotional life, because that actually teaches warmth and responsiveness. Children who are not shown empathy or blown off do tend to have like borderline personality disorder, other issues, because they never felt understood. They have anger issues. Yes, you definitely want to validate. And I really love the idea of this, DBT skills, dialectical behavioral therapy skills, which just say, actually, let's not run from the emotions. Let's run towards them. Let's sit for a moment, you and I, and cry and feel grief. And I'll be here with you and I'm going to hold your hand and you can cry as long as you want. Like, I get it. This is really hard, And then after the moment of crying, you can be like, okay, well, we can't spend the whole entire day crying because it's, that's, on the other, our body is like, an anchor on the bottom. You see, the crying will pass. So then now that we've sort of cried it out and feel better, what's next? And the next is like, not to just say it doesn't matter. It just means that we're survivors and we're resilient people and we can cope. And like, so if there's a solution, like a compromise or some way you can make it better, let's do that. But if there's not, let's just accept it. Life is full of challenges.
right,
like how we have.
Well, as you said, trying to get resilient children, that's part of it, is helping them learn to cope and learning to the pathways to solution or acceptance that they can't control their lives as much as they'd like to. As you said very early on, we have a generation of kids who really have not suffered. They've really had their every whim satisfied, including participation trophies. They haven't been losers. And it's important for them to learn those skills of disappointment, I guess.
Yeah, and sitting with grief and just sitting with it and not trying to make it go away. And that's how you repackage emotions. So because if you push them down, you ignore them, they come up as anger, especially in teenagers. Every time you push down a depressed kid, you tell them not to worry about it, they become angry. You push down anxiety in a young kid, they become angry. Anger is their default emotion.
Yeah.
That's why you gotta foster the other emotions. You gotta let them out, so that way they can be healthy in and have the full range of their emotion, which is what you want.
That's so important. That's so important. And listen for me, I'm always like, okay, let's move along. But no, that's so important to just give them their moment of expression and feeling it.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a minute about symptoms, and then I'll let you go. So, what kind of symptoms should parents be on the lookout for? Because again, teens in particular, they're slamming the doors, they're behind the screens now, more than ever. So, what kind of symptoms should parents be on the lookout for that their kids are struggling beyond, I'll call it a little bit of normal disappointment and frustration of right now?
There are certain red flags for suicide that parents should be aware of, and that's, for me as a psychiatrist, that's always the thing that I'm most concerned about, because you can't come back from that. So I think you really look for things like social isolation. Obviously, beyond COVID, like they're not really turning on their phone, they're not lighting up when people are calling them. They're saying they don't want to take the phone if a friend calls. You want to look at that as a huge red flag. You want to look at really pay attention if other children tell you something about your child. Because a lot of times these kids will know. They'll say, they'll come up to you as a parent and say, I'm really worried about, your son. Like, he said some stuff to me. Pay attention. That's really important. Never blow that off. The third thing is looking at things like, decline in grades, a decline in grooming. And then last but not least, really look at uh, always ask. If you're afraid they might harm themselves, ask, do you want to harm yourself? Do you feel suicidal? Do you want to kill yourself? Like, tell me. I really want to know. It's important. Oh, and then look for cutting. Look for any signs of self-mutilation or injury, because that's a huge red flag.
So that's all for suicide. But how about before they get to suicide? Just basic, trying to hold the basic depression, anxiety, et cetera, trying to keep, catch them before they get to that point.
Yeah.
So the signs that parents should look out for. And again, young kids, are there, I'll call it as, basic soothing mechanisms of rocking or hitting their heads or whatever? Like, is it, that kind of stuff?
Well, young kids, it's like regression. Are they now bedwetting again? Are they resorting to tantrums they might have resolved already, or earlier developmental stage things that you thought were gone come back? Like, that's a flag. Another flag for middle school age children is the same thing: social isolation, not wanting to, burying their head, poor grooming, coming down to dinner with like the hoodie over their head, or refusing to come down. Those are the things, similar to suicide, but also are indication of something that's really wrong. And of course, risky behavior, like that's new, that they hadn't seen before, drug use, that kind of stuff.
And how do you break through? It's so hard when you have a middle schooler or a teenager who doesn't want to communicate. So how do you open up a pathway to communication for them, to let them feel safe, to be able to talk and express their fears and concerns?
That's where I love social media. Social media is genius for that. You just whip up their social media accounts. Hopefully you've already friended them and whatever, because if it's young kids especially, they shouldn't have unmonitored accounts. But like, it's a great time to say, oh, I see this kid is doing this. What do you think about that? And just really open questions, like, whoa, what do you think about this? And you don't have to ask them never ask them direct, open-ended questions. That's a surefire way to shut down a teenager, is to say, how was your day? Instead you could say, oh, I heard you got a new teacher. What do the other kids think of him? Something like that. Very directed questions, targeted questions, in which it's called forced choice. So when I have kids come into my office, especially teenage boys, because teenage boys are sometimes more quiet, I always ask them forced choice questions. I'll say things like, do you like your mom or your dad better? I mean, it's a very kind of like charged question, but it's so amazing when I say that,
Right.
or who gets more angry, your mom or your dad? And then I get like a whole thing. But if I were just to say like, how do you get along with your mom and dad? They wouldn't answer. You
Right.
see? So it's like you
To
really
get
have
them
to think
to
about
talk.
how you ask. Yeah.
So this is trying to just get them to talk about something no matter what.
Yeah. Just get them talking. And through that process, it's like exposure. They'll get used to talking to you and then they'll start to open up, especially if you never judge them or get them into trouble for what they're saying and you don't come down on them. Or you don't dismiss them saying things like, oh, don't worry about that. Just listen. Spend a lot of time listening.
Are there any unique tricks or special tricks for parents with kids that are away? Like this person that had the question about her daughter being in college. Fortunately, that daughter seems to communicate well with her. But, there's so much that parents don't see, and that's okay. That's, college is kids finding their ways on their own. But again, at this point in time, between COVID and with the social justice stuff that's going on campus, where kids are just fearful to communicate and fearful of the bullying, the pointing fingers, the click, like all that aspect of things. Anything in particular for parents of college kids?
I mean, the cyberbullying is crazy right now. The statistics are nuts. It's like 1 in 5 kids have been cyberbullied. There's like, it's, 1 in 25 kids have been approached by sexual predators on the internet. Like, it's just crazy. And so there's a lot of that goes on. And, the best advice I could give is, try to keep yourself safe in that regard and, don't meet up with anyone you don't know, things like that. But when it comes to like, how do you know how to be PC enough, or how do you know what to say, or, you know, just be you, just be your best self. And if you make a mistake, a little bit of apologetic naivety will go a long way. Just like, oh, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Like, I'm sorry, next time, I'll say or do it differently, and hope that that's enough, because there's no way to 100% wall yourself off from it. But you've got to be you. Like, if you like something somebody else doesn't like, so be it. It eventually will work out, because you will manifest the people who will share your interests, and you'll be way happier.
What do you think is going to happen to this generation? And I guess we actually have a couple generations, 10, 15, 20 years out. The depression obviously scarred, I'll use that, the term loosely, scarred that generation. World War II scarred that generation, the uncertainty, the fears of that. What's this going to do in the future?
Well, I think we'll never be the same in how we handle germs. I think there will be a lot more contact for a really long time, if not forever, like how we handle colds. And if you have a cold, you'll be asked to wear a mask, like they do in Asia already. But like, I used to send my kids to school if they were sick. I mean, I almost barely never kept them home. Now I wouldn't send them to school, I mean, not during COVID, but even beyond when COVID's over, because I would be like, they had a running nose. Because now I'm like more conscious of spreading germs. But I think that's one thing, and then that will never change. And the second thing that will never change is that that people will, I think, be a little, I don't know, be a little more insular than I think we'd ever seen before. Like, I think we will find that people will have a hard time being as open with strangers. And that, to me, is sad.
Yeah. So hopefully we could be on the lookout for that and help people into that, because humans do need contact, as you said. We need to touch. We need to be in the vicinity of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
We are animals in a good way. So,
yes.
All right.
Yes. Yeah.
Dr. Lise, thank you so very much. Good luck with your book. Again, that's called No Shame, Real Talk with Your Kids About Sex, Self-Confidence, and Healthy Relationships.
Thank you.
And your website, drleolise.com. So I really appreciate you being with us. If anybody has questions, again, post them on the Facebook chat. We'll be monitoring it, so we'll get you answers back to it, because this is a really, really complicated time. So thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.